Welcome to Trust the Journey. I'm Jason Maletsky.
And I'm Melanie Curtis.
Our mission is to live, laugh, love, and learn together with you.
We're here to create conscious connections, to grow and contribute through our practice of openness, honesty, vulnerability, humility, and trust. Trusting the entire journey.
If you want to find us on the wider internet, our handle is trustthejourney.today. That'll get you to our website. That'll find us on Instagram or Facebook. It's basically all of our social media, trustthejourney.today, and that includes patreon.com.
Yeah, right on, family. Thank you guys so much for being with us as always. Here we go. All right, guys. So in this episode, we are going to be talking about psychedelics as an avenue for healing. So we're going to be doing a deeper dive on this subject. We want to explore what people are calling the, quote, psychedelic renaissance, sharing from our experiences and some of the things that we've learned in our effort to grow and learn along this line of learning. So also, just to be clear, before we even jump in no way are we condoning or advising anyone to break any laws relative to any topics we discuss on this show today or ever on the show. So just so that's out there, that's definitely where we stand.
Awesome.
Cool. So let's do it. Let's dive in.
Well, I'm going to start with an interesting podcast that I just listened to the other day, which is very famous. I'm sure many listeners know of it, and that's the Tim Ferriss podcast. And I just listened to one of the ones that he produced, which was a live recording of a session at a conference where they were discussing psychedelics in the medicinal state as a healing tool, as a medicine. And it was at a conference for investors. It was, entrepreneurs, companies that are looking to put money into what is the next big thing, what are the developing products in the world, where do people want to be investing if they're looking at, getting ahead of the curve right now. And so this is a financial investment they're talking about making, but I think it's also, it's an interesting relative reflection to an emotional investment and where we make our investment of time or where we make our investment of energy towards where the true value is in our lives coming up in the near future.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Tim straight away, because one of the things that I jotted down when I was prepping for this episode is that if you are a podcast listener or a growth-minded person, like a growth-minded podcast listener in any way, you've likely heard about psychedelics in these conversations, whether it's with Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, Aubrey Marcus, like lots of different shows are talking about this. And so it's definitely not a new topic. It's not a new thing that people are discussing. So it feels good to be leaning into it ourselves, given I certainly believe in psychedelics as an avenue for healing. One of the things that I always like to share with people too is that when we talk about growth-minded pathways and things that we can do to elevate our life experience and elevate our ability to heal, no one path is right for everyone. You know what I mean? Like some people get a lot from doing personal growth seminars with some badass person, maybe a Tony Robbins thing or, Rachel Hollis or Matthew Hussey or whatever. And those are great. And some people do therapy, and some people do life coaching, and some people do getting out in nature, and some people watch videos on the internet. All of those things are awesome. I simply add psychedelics to that list because of my personal experience with it, really believing and feeling and experiencing it as an avenue for that deeper healing.
It's hard to discredit any one particular thing, right? I mean, when we start talking about a list of all the different tools that are available to us in this day and age to address mental health and well-being, wholeness, whole health, it starts with, I think it starts with nutrition and exercise, and it develops into support systems, therapy, guides, families, literature, And then the list of different molecules that are available, whether it's from celery juice to mescaline,
Yeah,
whatever you're going to put into your body that's going to make you a healthier person, because it's a healthy choice that you're making, and the reason that you're making it is because you want to do something good for yourself.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. In no way. It's interesting because that's the thing, right? Like the dosing and stuff like that, that conversation and the idea of choosing to consume anything, it's totally in the realm of health. Where I come at this discussion is not in the realm of escape. If anything, what I think is fascinating in what I've learned over the course of X number of years that I've been learning about this stuff, the how much this stuff can help these experiences, these ceremonial, these intentionally aimed at healing and depth type experiences help people with addiction. And I don't know, I can't really speak knowledgeably on that subject, but the research that I've taken in seems to point to that, which I think is a fascinating, other side of the coin of a conversation of substances.
Yeah. Well, there's so much happening right now in the world as far as research that's being done to actually quantify value on these topics. I mean, for the first time in about a 30-year void, there was basically no research happening since the late 1960s, early 1970s, when a lot of laws were clamped down basically just to get control of a counterculture situation. They really just put some bookends around a whole bunch of different molecules and locked them out from traditional science to be able to access those, to be able to do research. And over the last, say, 5 or 10 years, that's really started to change. There's a couple of really, you know, explorative and curious scientists who started to really reach out and do some work. Rick Dobson from MAPS and Rick Strassman are really two famous people who've kind of pioneered the ground of scientific research on behalf of the psychedelic compounds in the scientific sense, right?
Right.
And over the last, say, 3 to 5 years, there's been a wave of research happening around the world, a lot in the USA, but also in other countries like Great Britain, where scientists are thoroughly engaging in research. And this is happening at universities, it's happening in private labs, and the amount of progress that's been made and the evidence that's being put forward after these studies have been completed, it's overwhelmingly compelling to the values that clearly state that these compounds have medicinal value that is obvious when put through clinical trials, placebo tests, all the double blind scenarios that you would expect from any medicine. And they actually, most of them are coming back with results that trump anything that's in our traditional field of medicine right now when it comes to mental health substances like
Yeah.
Prozac or any of these other like typical kinds of things, Valium, yeah, those types of compounds. So
Yeah,
it's really
yeah, keep
inspiring to
going.
see what's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's also, there's loads of resources, and I mean, we can leave listeners with a list of resources if we want. The TED Talk, it was Rick Strassman, right? Who did the recent TED Talk, which that alone I think speaks volumes that the TED stage is allowing this topic. You know what I mean? That alone is a credibility piece in terms of supporting the research and supporting the scientific backing of this type of changing of messaging around this stuff. It's similar. I think about, and again, I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm really just in this conversation. So for people listening, don't hear me as some expert on this subject. In no way am I one. I am more a interested citizen and interested person who cares deeply about mental health and spiritual healing for all of us. So that's where I come from, just in case there's any question on that. But I think about cannabis, which also is not something I have really used, but how that's changed in the legality recently. You know what I mean? And how that seems to be almost paving the way for us to really look at other plant medicines that can also serve in a true healing sense.
It's absolutely paving the way. I mean, there's no other example to point to say how a stigmatic point of view within our culture was created around a plant. You know, a simple plant that says, "Oh, this plant that did grow everywhere was just marginalized to something evil," and for very unique, strange reasons, actually. And the what ended up happening, you know, is it's completely changed our opinion. Where, you know, 20 or 30 years ago, the idea of having marijuana, or the stigma created around marijuana, which was, you know, a dope, very illegal, very useless kind of concept of just, you know, the stoners, the potheads kind of thing. And now it's revered as a powerful medicine, and our grandparents are enjoying the benefits of it while they're struggling through, you know, the aches and pains of golden years. And so many people with so many different types of medical ailments are finding the value in CBD or THC, and it's being not only decriminalized but legalized. Like Canada is an incredible example of complete legalization of cannabis. Which, I mean, I grew up in Canada. I grew up in an era where if you were a pot smoker, and I was a pot smoker as a young person, it was a powerful medicine for me as a young man. And I'm very grateful for it, because I probably would have lost my mind if I hadn't have had that escape at the time, something to settle me down.
Sure.
Now, and at the time growing up, there was a paranoia associated with any use of that compound, you know, and now it's completely illegal. The last time I was in Ottawa, the capital city of Canada, you could walk down the street to a pot store right around the corner from Parliament and get yourself some gummies.
Yeah. Well, you know, and it's interesting that you point to that as a younger person, because I feel like that also points to not yet having emotional skills. You know what I mean? Of course, as younger people and even adults, of course, we're still working on our emotional and spiritual skills, as it were. You know what I mean? To be able to access for ourselves, to calm ourselves down, you know, meditation practice or being in nature, again, whatever it is, mindset work. There's loads of different skills we can add to the repertoire. And I think as a young person, it's typical that people don't have access to those skills yet, or don't even know that they're available, you know? So I do invite people to continue to caveat how you might be thinking about this, and really considering it as one possible, you know, avenue.
There's also some credit to be given to medicine for circumstance. So a traumatic situation, right? Like when I was a young person, the reason why I leaned towards marijuana was having been through a few very intense life traumas at a very early age, and having zero coping mechanisms in place, or emotional examples of even the slightest way to comprehend or to deal with, overcome, process any of those traumas.
Yeah.
They're just straight up getting run over by a truck kind of experiences in life, and having nothing to reach to for how to process that, and finding something as simple as being able to take a toke and to be able to be mellow and find a safe space to just be all right in. That's magic at the right place and the right time. That's all you ever need. It's enough place to be able to process in your own mind, be objective and be like, oh yeah, wait, I can be okay for a second, as long as I just change my perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And pointing to the deep trauma, maybe not being able to heal that immediately then, but later in life being able to go into a psychedelic experience that is meant for depth, which is meant for sort of unearthing our deeper traumas, whether they are theoretically quote unquote small or big, it doesn't matter. They may magnify over time and become really larger traumas in the scope of our lives, that if we don't bring light and consciousness to them, they'll just continue to drive our choices. You know, so like that's a huge part of what I think this ceremonial use of this stuff is for really trying to help us heal those things that maybe happened when we were younger that we haven't yet had access to.
That's a really interesting concept that you bring up about like the scale of a trauma, because it's kind of irrelevant, right?
Totally.
Like it's whatever trauma occurs in your life is whatever
Mm-hmm.
scale it is to whatever size that it affects you. If it affects you by 1 iota, then the scale is measurable, and that's all that
100%.
matters. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And it can accumulate over time, so like that's something that in my work with this stuff that I've been able to uncover is in looking and really looking and going back into my younger years. One of the things that I discovered was a no large thing, and I say large again, I don't mean it like that, but meaning like nothing that stands out to me as like an obvious thing. It was more for me going, oh, I looked at everything. It sounds so weird, but I looked at everything, and it was accumulation. What I noticed really strongly was a cumulative effect. And this is very specific to me, but a cumulative effect of things that I allowed that were not okay, like things that I experienced where I did not stand up for myself. So that's just one thing that I really got. And it's difficult to describe the depth of that breakthrough for me, but it was a powerful one to really go, oh, I really haven't for many, many years been standing up for myself and saying and speaking truth to things that aren't okay, and really saying that's not okay, and not in a judgmental sense, but in a sense of going, this is something I believe is not okay. That's a boundary for me, and I'm willing to speak up for that. You know what I mean? So it's like I've done that a lot in my waking life as well. I've really worked on boundaries, but to really see and get sort of access to the understanding of how far back that way of being for me went and how strong that cumulative effect was for me, to really understand that and get connected to the like gravity of that, and understand why it has been so challenging for me to say and speak up and be averse to conflict and things like that, and to really perceive it as conflict. It's just a massive breakthrough for me to be able to go, no, and have that be just as okay as, being, what I mean? Being just totally okay with that. It sounds, I don't know, it's probably not very, I don't know how this is hitting people's ears, but for me, that experience was big. That awareness was really, really big.
This is an echo of the same point, right? Like it's all about our own individual experience and how we feel about something, how we perceive something, and how it has affected us. So whatever the element is that is limiting our experience or affecting our experience as a whole, this is what we're working on overcoming or growing through or growing into or growing out of, whatever words we want to use to describe the experience of coming to terms with, understanding, letting go of, being free, integrating, all these types of words. I want to touch on the difference between recreational use and medicinal, therapeutic, or ceremonial use.
100%.
Yeah, so this is a massive thing, right? Like,
yes.
I think a lot of us don't really recognize the value of the two different settings that we're referring to here. So I'm sure many of our listeners, many people out there have had encounters with psychedelic compounds, whether it be magic mushrooms or LSD or something to that effect at some point in their life. It was likely at a concert or a party or at some event, with some friends somewhere. And typically those kind of experiences fall within a particular category of experience. There's going to be some enhanced mood, euphoria, maybe some confusion, maybe things are kind of trippy, some lights, some colors, some things get kind of blurry, or there's some hallucinations that go along with it. But the recreational environment, taking some magic mushrooms with your friends and giggling a bunch on the couch, is a completely different setting, a completely different formula of how you put in place a ceremonial, therapeutic, or medicinal use of these compounds. So let me just kind of dive into some general differences. First of all, typically what's being done right now in the laboratories, what the therapists are doing with like the MAPS organization, the multidisciplinary association for psychedelic studies, they're doing all these training with therapists right now, and they set up a somewhat clinical environment where you have a couch or a comfortable bed to lay on. You have a therapist who's going to sit with you, and you're going to ingest a dose of a compound like psilocybin, which is the active compound found in magic mushrooms. And then we're going to be in a quiet space and really just processing and being internal to that experience for the entire duration of the trip, right? So the whole point of the experience is to go within and to allow what's generally referred to as a meditation to take place, where we're sitting, we're being quiet, we're thinking and recognizing our own thoughts, hearing our own thoughts, and making notes and recognizing our feelings about our thoughts, and then choosing whether or not we're happy or unhappy about the thoughts that we're having and how they're affecting us, and then choosing into delving into them more to understand them more, choosing to step out of them, or maybe choosing to ask in for some help or to process those or make a note of them so that we can work on them with some guidance of others later. But in general, the therapeutic or ceremonial use of these compounds isn't typically accented by lights and music and like lots of stimuli and being where the point of it is just to laugh and giggle at how silly things are. And I'd say the big thing that's worthy of note here is the dosages are very, very different. Where the typical dose that most people would encounter with, say, LSD or magic mushrooms would be maybe a gram of magic mushrooms, a small amount in their hand, or a blotter or a drop of liquid acid or something that's going to enhance their social communal experience at an event or party or festival or music show or whatever. Those dosages are generally on the very low end, and they don't tend to have the same type of impactful experience that a ceremonial or a full dose would be. So comparatively with psilocybin, you would take probably say 5 to 7 grams for a ceremonial setting, where you might take about a gram in a recreational setting for what most people would ingest. That's going to encourage a very different experience, a much more deeply intellectual, introspective, and self-aware and self-introspective processing experience. Now, I'll take just a second and take that a little bit further, whether it's being done with compounds like psilocybin, which are in stage 2 or stage 3 testing right now with MAPS. If you look at the same type of environment that's being hosted with, say, ayahuasca in Peru, this is a very popular thing, and internationally it's starting to pop up all over the world, becoming more and more accepted for its value. And you can really see I'll just diverge for a second.
Yeah, please. No,
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah.
I'm soaking it in personally.
For
I'll share more after.
For years, I personally watched a few of my friends go through the experience of traveling to the Amazon, choosing to go into one of these ceremonies, right, where they're a few days or a week long, and they repeat the ceremony night after night, and then seeing their faces when they come back and seeing the difference in the person, right? The person I knew before they left and the person that I see after they return, and the actual change of their aura, the change of their energy, the change of their entire persona that comes back, and how they just seem so much lighter and more glowing and just clean and vibrant and removed of conflict. A lot of the weights of experience of being human seem to be washed away, and they seem more angelic and just fulfilled, and all these light being types of description. So I'll bring that back around to the concept of using these things in a spiritual, therapeutic, healing type environment, this is where I really think the point of this conversation is about. It's about changing the way that we look at things to better understand their value. So if you say, if we put magic mushrooms on the table as a concept and say, yeah, okay, it's silly. I've read a whole bunch of forums, like people say, oh yeah, yeah, I took some once. I laughed on the couch with a bunch of friends. That didn't heal me. I didn't get any better.
Right.
Like, well, we kind of missed the whole point of how they should be used. And that applies to just about anything that's available to us. You could take any pharmaceutical drug that is FDA approved right now that has a massive value, which could save our lives in a Western medicine sense. And if you use it in a non-prescribed way, it's not going to give you the same value. So I think this is really like the cornerstone to the topic for me right now.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely. Clarifying that. Yeah. And just to jump in quickly, because again, Jay has a lot more knowledge on this subject than I do and experience as well. And so anyway, just as the sort of quote unquote younger person in the learning and exploration of this education and experience, it's for me, like even being introduced to this subject was interesting. And I was definitely averse to it at first when I first heard about it, because I've always grown up with the Nancy Reagan. So I'm looking at my Nancy Reagan, just say no to drugs. And yeah, there's a huge part of me that fully still believes that, in the sense of distinguishing which things would be unhealthy for me to even consider doing. So like we've mentioned that on the show before, but I just always like to reiterate that when I'm talking about this subject, because it is very clear for me where I stand on this stuff. Even though I'm young in the discussion, it is for me very fully around this idea of healing, but also being willing, and also being willing to question what I have been taught or just societally given to believe. And so as a result, where I'm going with that is that initially hearing about this as a potential avenue for healing, I was like, whoa, okay, I'm interested. I don't know if I don't know. I don't think that's for me. That definitely was, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago. And so then I started to learn. I started to listen to videos. I started to have conversations with friends that knew more than I did. I started to read books. I started to consider my own thoughts. I started to really look at things and the personal growth development work that I was doing just alongside of that. So I really did due diligence for myself to learn, to get to a point where I'm like, okay, am I ready? Is this for me now that I know more and I feel safer? I have trusted people in my circle that I can truly trust to know that my safety is taken care of, and this type of stuff when we're talking about ceremonial use, you know what I mean? And ceremonial experiences, because that was the only thing I was even interested in doing anyway, when you're talking about recreational versus ceremonial, you know what I mean? So the idea that there was a pathway to some deeper healing, that was very, very appealing to me from the start. But I had to do a lot of work to educate myself to feel like I wasn't just being reckless.
I completely identify, especially coming from a culture where recreational use of these compounds is quite common, and it's not at all unheard of to hear of, a friends group, engaging in the use of psychedelic compounds as a party enhancement on, say, a Saturday night at an event, where you're like, oh, we're going to do this and it's going to be fun. And you're like, well, whatever, like that, what's the greater value? I mean, I'll tell you the truth is that my development with these compounds has come as a result of that environment. But in choosing into higher dosages and finding myself less and less engaged to the recreational setting, I've found myself over the years, now it's been a very long time that I've been exploring this these spaces within myself, that my callings generally pull me towards a natural environment, a quiet space, a safe space where I can be alone or with one or two other friends who are also choosing into the same experience, and looking internally and realizing that the whole point is for introspection, and being able to dig deep inside and ask a lot of the deeper questions that are in there buried, holding us back, from our overcomings of whatever might be limiting us.
Yeah, definitely. It's not easy work either. Like
No,
just
no.
for the record, by the way.
It's not fun.
Oh my God, as I cough, like,
Yeah.
excuse me. Yeah, that's ironic. It is definitely not easy work. If people think it's a fun experience to do this deep diving, it's not. In my experience, and this is one of the greatest values I got. And I want to share just a little bit from my personal experiences because I feel like that's what I have really to offer at this point.
Please,
and again,
please.
not
Love to hear
yeah, not that this is what would happen with everybody. Again, like Jay, you said before, like this is just what happens with you as an individual. It's all very, very, very personal, and that's the whole point too. And so anyway, why I say it's difficult work is that for me, and this is just again for me, there was so much grief that was still in me. Like literally, I've done psilocybin for ceremonial use a few times, and I've done ayahuasca one time. And I don't think I could have gotten to ayahuasca without doing psilocybin, but psilocybin for me still was very, very emotional. Like I'm so grateful to have expressed the sadness that was in me around certain things. And that was so, so, so healing, expressing the tears that came with certain fears, that type of stuff. So it is, again, by the way, it is not easy. There's a huge part of me that I don't know if it's how you would describe it, like the ego or whatever, that wants, at least for me, wanted to stop me from crying, that didn't want me to cry, that really was like, just didn't want to cry, because I'm there. This space for me is being held by a facilitator who I know and trust and love. And so that is how I felt safe and supported to do this, of course, for sure. But even just being witnessed by someone I love and care about deeply, I still had trouble letting go. And so when I was able to begin to access this willingness to let go of my emotional stores, as you sort of point to, and release some of that grief and fear and pain from whatever it's come from, that was hugely, hugely healing for me. And also, I can easily see in my experiences, which, by the way, are over the course of a couple of years. So this is in no way something I would suggest doing back to back. We talked about integration, and that's huge, I think, as well. We can talk about that more. But it's not about doing multiple ceremonies just so you can just clear grief and do it here and there, here and there. It's, in my experience, it's you have a ceremony, you have an experience, you get deep, powerful insights, and then you go back to your life and you do the real work of putting it into your waking real life, and you make change from those insights by doing the work every single day. So like ceremonial work is difficult, real life integration can be difficult as well. So I just don't want to romanticize it. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's been some of the best things I've done for myself in terms of healing, and the most difficult.
Absolutely. I want to echo on one of the points that you made there, and I'll inform a little bit at the same time.
Yeah, please.
I recently attended the World Ayahuasca Conference in Girona, Spain, consciously choosing into making connections to a culture of people that have the same spiritual, medicinal, wholeness, wellness belief systems as myself. And it was a wonderful experience because it was such a broad spectrum of perspectives on the usages, the values, the risks, the effects, the histories, the where it's going, and going from conference room to conference room or seminar to seminar, and hearing some of them presented by a scientist, some presented by a facilitator or a shaman, others presented by an indigenous family from the deepest part of the Amazon, where they've been holding a lineage for hundreds of thousands of years. So really, really unique perspectives from all vantage points about the values of these healing ceremonies and these healing plants. And I really didn't know, why or what I was going there to learn, what my key takeaways were going to be from the experience of just being present to all these minds that are of like interest. And there were two things that really, really, really stuck out to me that I heard come from the scientist's mouth. I heard them come from the facilitator. I heard them come from the shaman. I heard them come from the practitioner. I heard them come from the indigenous leaders, from everybody across the board. Connection. The number one word was connection. And it was connection to self, connection to each other, connection to the planet, connection to nature, connection to everything, meaning total connection. This feeling of connectedness and a realization, not just a feeling, but a true realization of the concept of what it means to be connected to everything.
Yeah.
And that was the number one piece, that it didn't matter who was saying it, but in some way what they were saying referred to that, and it brought up a powerful glowing energy within them that said, I understand, I'm connected, we're all part of the same thing. And that brings everybody together as a united force, and it allows everybody a comfort and a feeling of like, oh wait, I'm not alone. I'm not just out there, me against the world. It's I am the world. We are the world. We're all here together. We all think we're against each other, but really we need to be helping each other.
Yeah.
And that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. So just to get to that point of being on the other side of the coin, where we live in this culture that's so separate and so capitalistic, of like, it's me and then everything else. That to hear that reversed and presented the other way around was so powerful. Now, the second term that I heard used repeatedly from one conversation to another was the word, and you just said it a minute ago, integration. Now, the concept of integration is, I'll try to do my best I can to explain it the way I understand it. And what I hear it as meaning, and I actually had this conversation yesterday with a dear friend who is also a seeker and somebody who wishes to grow spiritually and follow this path through an ayahuasca ceremonies as well. And we were talking about the idea of integration as how to take this feeling, this knowing, this understanding of yourself and everything that comes from these deep ceremonial experiences, and make it part of who we are on an everyday basis, moving it into how we feel about everything that happens to us, how we feel about ourselves, how we act, how we feel about others, and allowing that to just be a resonant energy, right? Where we have a lifetime of practice creating opinions about the way that we feel about particular things. I view a circumstance a particular way because I've been practicing that view my whole life. And suddenly I have an experience which allows me to see it from a different perspective. And now I go, oh, wait, maybe I've been too judgmental and I've been too hard on those people or been too hard on myself. And now I should be less judgmental and allow myself to view this from a better point of view. And it's going to be less traumatic and more healing for everybody involved, including myself. And it's really, really easy to slip back to our old point of view about the way that we've viewed something before, because it's habitual. It's just like any addiction, right? Like if we've been a cigarette smoker or an alcohol drinker for a long time and we find ourselves going, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to see it from a new perspective. it's easy to fall back to that old habit. And it doesn't have to be an addiction to a compound like nicotine to have that same experience. It can be simply judging a circumstance or a feeling about ourselves or about others the same way. So I'll bring it back to the point of integrating our new perspectives, our new thoughts, our new abilities to view ourselves, our actions, or others' experiences or actions from a new way, to let that creep into everything that we do and change who we are as a person to be somebody better that we prefer, a better
Yeah.
version of ourselves that we would rather see when we look in the mirror.
Yeah. Think about this. I'm smiling over here the whole time you're talking because how many times have I talked about feeling a fear of disconnection?
Yeah.
A million fucking times. And so, like, if we talk about specific takeaways, by the way, there are way too many specific takeaways, at least from my experiences, as minimal as they are, that I could even, there's no way I could even share them on this show. I mean, maybe multiple episodes, but my point is that I just want to say that. But one of the things absolutely echoes that in my personal experience with this is that real, true getting and understanding of connectedness. Of the, it sounds hokey when it's said out loud. It's like, I feel like it can sound hokey with just the language and being like, oh, we're all connected. But I believe that. And, before that, like before feeling it, I believed it. There was a part of me, like, I feel like my intuitive self was like, I really believe, that we're all connected, the universe, all things. It goes back to when the podcast even first started, maybe gonna happen, when you had the One Love New Year's Eve thing, and I was like, that's so right on. That Jay Maletsky, I'm gonna drop him a line, It's because there was that intuitive call to that intuitive knowing of and belief on some level, even though I didn't have evidence to prove this to myself. I just believed. I'm like, we are all connected. Like I just had it. And so anyway, why I'm sharing that is because it has been both a source of huge inspiration in my life and a huge motivator for my work and how I can show up in huge love and deep, powerful, presence and witnessing of other people, that type of stuff without fear. And equally how I can wildly fear when I get attached to people, when I feel like, oh my God, I'm having this connection. That fear can easily come back in, like you said, the old pattern. And so to continually make efforts to really reverse that idea has been a powerful practice for me over many years and has simply been reinforced positively through my experiences with psychedelic ceremonial healing.
You said the word that I've been waiting to speak on, which is practice.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it really hits home for me, and I think this is another one that is a key takeaway as far as the relevance to therapeutic use of a compound versus recreational or one-off use of something. I could take a Prozac pill and say, yeah, I tried that, whatever, it didn't have any effect. But it's something you need to integrate in with regularity and with scheduled, repeated application for a specific purpose. Mm-hmm. Just like doing yoga or running. Like if you are not a runner, okay, if you don't run and somebody says, let's go for a run, you're going to be like, are you out of your fucking mind? Right?
No thanks.
No thanks. Yeah, exactly. No thanks. It's a simple, I see it all the time. And I was that guy, right?
Yeah.
Be like, want to go for a run? I'm like, no, that sounds horrible. I would never want to do that. But
totally.
Right? Yeah. But if you actually do it a few times and get a habit and get your legs used to it and get your feet and your knees and your shoes and figure out how to do it, and you do it enough times where you're like, oh, I have actually practiced this enough that I now know how to do it. Now it doesn't hurt so much when you do it, and the idea of doing it is actually appealing and you start to reap the benefits of it. And so whether it's running or whether it's yoga or whether it's going to a therapist or a counselor or practicing the deep conversations or
Yep.
going to psychedelic therapy, any of these things is going to have require the same thing, which is an applied practice,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. And I love also what's showing up in my relating to this and my education and interest in this over time is I believe and I'm called quite strongly in my life to experience life and to be open to experiences and to be open to being wrong. Being open to having my mind having it be able to be changed because I, didn't know something and something new has come into my consciousness and into my awareness. So, and I said this earlier, but the idea of not being reckless, so that that's the thing. I'm not just recklessly called to life experiences. I am willing to listen to my intuition when it speaks around an experience that I am drawn to. You know what I mean? So, and at the same time, I am equally honoring of this feeling of readiness. So, this is something that I learned when I was learning about ayahuasca, which, by the way, took me many years to even remotely consider doing, is that when you're ready. Because there were multiple times over the X number of years, since I've first learned about it and started learning about it, where I was like, yep, okay. I'm going to do it. Yep. I think I'm ready. And I just wasn't, so then I didn't schedule it, I didn't actually follow through on the scheduling. And I said, oh, it's not the right time. And other life things, I allowed other life things to step in. And so I can only see that now that I have and did reach my point of readiness with it through my own education and my own preparing of myself and my own connectedness to my intuition and to my support people who were helping me learn and get to a point where maybe I would be with zero pressure. I always held in myself that if I never wanted to do it, I never had to. Always. Yeah. I always gave myself the space to just, this is me learning, and if I do it, great. If I don't do it, great. I will trust myself and only and solely make my decision based around that. And again, so why I bring that up is both to highlight that and to highlight that is not me being, I'm just going to make this decision because I don't really know what I'm doing, but I feel intuitively called to it, so I'm going to do it. I feel like that's a bit reckless. And that's why I really highlight this education period for me. Like, that was really important for me to feel safe and to feel like I was doing something truly good for myself versus doing something not good for myself.
I think this is the whole, for me anyways, I'll just say that from my point of
please.
view, the whole reason we're having this conversation right now is to get the topic on the table for people to listen and start thinking about it. And because what's going to be happening in the next few years is we've already seen cannabis move into a legal state in a number of places where it's gone from being medicinal to recreational. And now magic mushrooms, psilocybin, has been legalized in Denver, Colorado, and as well as Oakland, California.
Right.
And I think that in the next couple of years, in the next year or two, you're going to see it continue to be legalized in more and more city states. And at the same time, there's a number of other compounds. So ketamine has already been approved for the treatment of depression. So legally now you can go to a therapist and you can get ketamine therapy to help treat depression, and it's showing excellent results, like immediate results, like leave the therapy session with improved resistance to being depressed. And psilocybin and MDMA are both in their stage 2, stage 3 phase trials. So within the next 2 to 3 years, both of these are going to become legally available, and you're going to be able to go to a therapist and get these compounds. So I'm excited to talk about them now so that people can start getting their mind around the idea that this is something that I may want to do, or that I'm going to get myself ready to do when it becomes available.
Yes.
Right. And that's the whole point. That's the, like,
Yeah.
it took me years to get ready to do ayahuasca. And of course, anybody, you can go to Peru right now. You could get
Yep.
on a plane. You can go to one of the many, many excellent places that are down there and engage in one of these ceremonial endeavors to, dive into your subconscious and explore what's really going on inside yourself. But you have to be ready for it. You
Yeah.
needs the prep time. It took me a decade to
Yep.
get ready for ayahuasca, and I'm so glad that I finally did it. And it took some
Yeah.
good solid nudging from some people that I trust, some people that are very important in my life, saying, "Hey Jay, you need to do this. This is something for you. It's going to affect you in a positive way." And I'm like, "Oh man, I don't know if I want to do that. That's going to be tough. It's scary. I'm super scared." They're
So
like, "Yeah, it's scary." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you're going to feel better afterwards." And I'm like, "Oh man, okay, crap. I know, I trust you. You're one of my best friends, and you've influenced my life in a positive way. Why would you tell me otherwise?" And so I guess I'm here doing that for you listeners right now, to help encourage that same gradual preparation of the mind, of the spirit, of the body, to find the time and the place when we're each ready to step into these challenges of looking inward and seeing what we find.
I love that. Yeah, I echo that. That is definitely, I mean, Jay and I have talked about this behind the scenes, guys, that we were like, let's talk about this because this is important to us as individual people. It's important in terms of a mission, not, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's not the right word, but the movement, it feels like a movement. It feels also like such a high value potentiality for people. Again, if it's right for someone, not because not everything is right for everyone, and that's totally, totally okay. For me, it feels like a calling in a sense that, I mean, listen, life coaching is also a calling. So I'm not trying to over fucking pedestal it up. Like, I'm really not. Like, because I feel called to multiple things in life. And this conversation is one that I feel it's important because I guess because of just the experience that I've had and how it's affected me, it's undeniably helped me. And the stories that I've heard from other people and people that I care about and love who have also shared their experiences as part of their integration and healing process, that stuff, that even those conversations are so healing. Just hearing that it was possible to find some deep pain and release it, like that alone was so inspiring to me to hear as just a possibility, for God's sakes. I was like, whoa, that's possible? Amazing. So part of me is basically just wanting to do that for you and for people listening, is that like, yeah, in my experience, that's possible. In my experience, I was able to release deep grief and come out the other side and go, holy fuck, I survived that. That was an intense, crazy, wow. And I'm happy to share more in future episodes, but like the possibility alone was a big, big, big deal for me, which started me on my path of learning. And so that's what I invite people to start to lean into if you want to. If you want to. If not, ditch this episode, and that's all good too.
So I'm going to mention a couple things. One of them is I'm going to reflect on a personal experience. I was able to forgive in a circumstance that left me so deeply emotionally scarred that I did not know whether I was ever going to be able to heal from it. Right? I had a heart that was so broken and so tragically ripped apart that I just found myself in a state of numbness and anger and hatred and just so much agony. And through deep psychedelic reflection, I was able to find a place in myself where I was able to literally pick up the phone and say, "I forgive you."
Oof.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing. Like
Amazing.
amazing, especially as a younger person and having not knowing how to get there
Yeah.
and having a deep knowing inside that that's what needed to happen, you know?
Yeah.
And I can't echo the value of that I can't overstate the value of what it means to be able to find a place to be able to come to forgiveness within myself, like truly finding that place of forgiveness deep down inside and then being able to express it and let it go. And it's over. It's
Mm-hmm.
gone. It's forgiven. So that's part of it, right? Is having these deep emotional experiences ourselves and going, hey, this happened for me. I don't know what can happen for you, but it's at
Yeah.
least worth looking into, researching, thinking about, trying, maybe,
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
some of those work. And some of the numbers are incredible. So initial results from studies with psilocybin have shown that 60% of participants in the double-blind placebo studies have shown lasting effects, last 60%
Yeah.
lasting effects beyond
Lasting.
1 and 2 years. 1 and 2
Lasting.
years. Yeah, lasting
Yeah.
effects. Like a year later, 2 years later. How do you feel? I feel way better
Yeah.
than I did a year or 2 years ago because of these experiences. And what they show is that initially following the event is that now hopefully I don't fumble these numbers too badly, so don't quote me, but I know I'm close, is 5% of people put the experience within the top 3 most important experiences in their entire life.
Yeah.
Meaning like losing a mother or father or the birth of their child,
Yeah.
something that is so impactful in their life that it's like, this is one of the most important things that's ever happened to me.
Yes.
And when you look at the study later, like of the people who retained value of their experiences, it's something like of the somewhere around 20% of the people put it as the most impactful experience in their entire life. Like nothing has been more important to them than what they experienced at that time. So what does that say to me is it says, hell, if anybody can tell me that this is something that has had more impact on them than anything else they've experienced in their entire life, it's at least worth picking up opening up the laptop and doing some research,
Yeah.
ordering a few books, doing some reading, listening to some audiobooks, listening to some podcasts, doing some exploration and some research to see if it might be right for you to maybe have a similar experience.
It's exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
So you can hear my advocacy, right? I'm like, it's the reason I get so excited about this is because it's been something that's been deeply spiritually meaningful and held dear to my heart for such a long time. And I've been looking forward to the point in our cultural revolution where this could be something that we could talk about again, where
Yeah.
society is actually thinking that this might be something we want to go back down a road of exploring. And this is truly the point in time where the scientists, the doctors, the researchers, the FDA are all on the
Mm-hmm.
same page of going, we might have made a mistake a while back.
Yeah.
Actually,
Well,
yeah.
exactly. Well, and I think that's part of what we're doing with this conversation as well is being a part of you know, the part of a part of the conversation
Exactly.
that is looking at that, and so that there's more information out there available to more people to be thinking about it in this kind of way versus just hearing about it randomly from some other whatever source that who knows what their perspective or stance is on it. Because the piece of the history that I thought was so fascinating was how there was positive press about psychedelics for I don't again I'm butchering this I cannot quote the history, but I remember some story about, and I feel like this came from Michael Pollan's book How to Change Your Mind,
Yep.
is how it was positively in the press and then basically just was in the press in a negative sense, and then they started talking about all these sort of negative things and blowing up the negative press, whether it was accurate or not. I can't recall the details. You might know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's what I have even a small bit of quote unquote power to support is positive press from the stance that I feel like it deserves positive press. You know what I mean? Like, I want to be a part of that, given in this day and age of the internet, we can do that. So I'm like, I'm willing to attach my name and my self to this conversation because I believe it's important as well.
I definitely echo that. And I want to also share on the concept that this isn't the same group of people that we once would view the stigmatic stereotype of these compounds in relationship to. The conferences, the seminars, the scientific gatherings, the minds that are getting together all around the country. In New York, there's the Horizons conference. Out in California, they have the psychedelic symposium. We're having them in Spain. We're having them all around the world. And at least open up the MAPS webpage. Maps.org, I believe is what it is. And
I'll double check.
yeah, and have a look at the work that's being done by the lists and lists of reputable doctors, therapists, scientists, researchers, the people that are putting in, that are really the same respected people that would prescribe you anything else over the counter or from behind the prescription desk. And then the actual science that's comparable, like risk factors, are so low compared to a lot of the other compounds that are out there that people are taking every day, and that are, there's some major issues like opioids in our culture. It's massive problems. And
was just to interject, the risk, understanding the low risk was a huge part of how I was able to, again, inch through and get to a point where I was wanting to and felt ready to do this. And I will echo, there are certain things that absolutely cannot mix. So there are things that you need to be well aware of before you do anything like this.
Yep. Well, I'm pretty stoked on this. I'm really excited to have opened the conversation, and there's so much that we haven't touched on as far.
So much.
It's just the deepest well of potentiality as far as, when it comes to spirituality and wellness, and I really think the word that hits home for me is wholeness.
Yeah.
So let's keep up the practice.
Yeah, let's keep up the practice. And again, given we mentioned this is really the tip of the proverbial iceberg, we invite you guys to hit us up with questions, because again, we're happy to go other directions on this topic. We will, most certainly. But yeah, we want you guys to, if you're curious, if you have questions, if you want things, if you're looking, or I don't know, again, just whatever you might have as a question, please hit us up. So you can always hit us up on Instagram, which is trustthejourney.today. Send a direct message. We get stuff there all the time. But yeah, we invite you guys to really be curious if you are, and we're happy to be a part of that, assisting you in growing in your own knowledge and education on this type of subject.
Yeah, there's so many powerful resources that we can refer to, whether it's, in print or in audio form or on the internet. And if you need some guidance there about what to look towards to better educate yourself, I'm definitely happy to help point in that direction.
Absolutely. Well, right on, my friend.
That went quick, eh?
Yeah, that was, geez, of course it did. That makes me, that's not surprising. But anyway, guys, we digress for now. Thank you, as always, for being with us per usual. I mentioned the Instagram, trustthejourney.today, but our website is also trustthejourney.today. And if you want to support the mission, you can donate on Patreon if you just are inspired to do that. But part of what Patreon support gets our family, our Trust the Journey family, is membership into a private group where we really are expanding connections and supporting each other and opening up these dialogues in a really direct and meaningful and expanded way. So if you want to be a part of that type of Facebook group, please, donate $1 a month. We'll get you in there. So please, we invite you to do that anytime you're inspired.
Yeah, and that group, we've called it Trust the Journey Family for a reason, is it truly is a family. It's a safe space where everybody involved can feel okay to share their challenges, the things that they're struggling with, their successes, things that we've overcome, and just be real and know that the environment is going to be supportive to that real experience of humanity. I also want to mention that to help us get this show out there, to really get it to other audiences, the direct share, the personal message is probably the biggest thing. I can't say thank you enough to the people who send me podcast links, who send me links to shows, like, oh, this is for you. And this is exactly what's affected me in my life in such a positive sense, is when somebody cares enough to say, I think you would gain value from listening to this. So if you feel like you know somebody who would gain value from listening to our show, please pay it forward, pass it along, and hopefully we'll get a greater audience and do greater positive influence in the world.
Yeah, I'm almost comically committed to sending podcast links to people in direct messages. Yeah. So yeah, but guys, truly, as we say all the time, however you're inspired to do it, if you just want to listen, that is also totally amazing. Whatever you're inspired to do is perfect. And we thank you. We love you. And as always, remember, keep laughing, keep loving, and keep trusting the journey.
Love you.
We love you.